is closer to it. Meantime, at the sharper end of the field, Martin Short comes in at the end of his stint. Joe Bradley.
Yes, indeed. We've been waiting for him, camped out just outside his garage. 246 is the number of the BMW. Martin Short just coming to the end of his 2-hour stint. We've been next door looking at the Intersport BMW. Looks like they've done a prop shaft. We'll pop next door and cover that one, because it's quite interesting to see how the prop shaft has actually failed as the 246 BMW fires up. Did well not to spin the wheels.
Who
Very
got into
damp
that?
here.
Was that Richard getting back into it?
I believe so, yes. Just looking at those tyres that have come off. Still plenty of block tread there, so we're still not wearing the wets out.
Joe, are we going to have another, what has now become infamous Joe Bradley show and tell then with prop shaft?
I think so.
All right.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll have a word with Martin Short first.
Okay.
And then we'll pop next door to Intersport, have a word with Kevin. Now Martin has gone and sat straight down. Get up, man. Not finished yet. The work of a racing driver. You might think, hang on, have we got a camera on this? Hang on, I'll help him across. Come on, mate. You'll be all right. You'll be all right. You'll be all right.
I'm aching a bit.
Yeah, you've done 2 hours in the car, Martin.
Oh, yeah. That was much better. Obviously the rain must have stopped and it's just spray, and the grip levels have come up on the circuit now, and the BMW is the Team ABBA with Roll Centre Racing BMW is really starting to work now. We just needed a bit more grip. The front wheel drive cars had a lot of advantage when it was really wet and we were struggling, but now the car's coming back, you know, the track's coming back to us, and that was lovely. I had a little battle with Phil Quaife. He was behind me, and they told me on the radio and said, right, be quiet now, don't talk to me anymore, and I pulled away from him, so I thought not bad for an old codger.
Yeah, certainly your lap times were there and you were pulling it back on the leader. But I have noticed, Martin, hardly any tyre wear on the wet still, so we're still not seeing a dry line, are we?
No, but the grip is definitely going up significantly on the track, significantly. You know, we were doing 48s a little while ago, now we're doing 38s, you know, on a clear lap. So, yeah, it's not going to dry out, really, is it, you know, with this big blackness. And but anyway, it was good and really enjoyed it. And Richard had a fantastic stint before me, didn't he? I just caught the end of it, and he did brilliant. Well,
you know, you haven't done too badly there, and you were pulling time. Has Richard gone back into the car?
Yes, he has.
He was aware of that when he got out. Now, are you going back in the car in a couple of hours?
If it's still like this, yes.
Right, yeah. Wait, I don't think it's going to change. I think you're right. I think we're going to have to wait for the sun to come up.
Yeah, when the sun comes out. And then the other boys can have a go.
Yeah, in the nicer weather. Yeah. Martin, I'm going to help you back into your chair, okay?
Right, come on.
Yeah, come on. I'll help you back. These old boys shouldn't be doing all this.
It's like a trailer from The Odd Couple.
Get out of it.
In SP Touring, Neil Primrose now behind the wheel of the 117, just crossing the line, in fact, Neil, as we're talking about. That's the Saxon Motorsport 135D BMW, the GTR version of that. He's done 250 laps in 20th position overall.
He's third in class.
In third in class, yeah. In second in the D2 category, in the SP Touring category, is Christoph Ulrich in the 102 GR Motorsport BMW E90 M3, and leading that class third overall on 273 laps. So again, with laps in hand, Richard Neary in the Team ABBA Commercials with Road Centre Racing. That, as I say, a top three car.
What was I going to talk about? I was going to talk about the fact that Ivo Breukers was the only, was not the only one who didn't come into the pits during that Code 60 that we've just had. And I'll be interested to see how this plays out, because Richard Neary, remember, went into the pits just before the code, or rather he took the car out just before the Code 60 was given. Martin Short brought the car in, Richard Neary took it out, and then we had the Code 60. And around about the same time, or just before that, in fact, Phil Quaife came in. So both Phil Quaife handing the car to Ramsey Moutran and Richard Neary taking over from Martin Short happened just before the Code 60. Now, Ivo Breukers stayed out, so none of those cars came in during the Code 60. The only one that came in, once again, was the Team Bleekemolen Seat, Sebastian Bleekemolen himself having come into the pits. And no sooner have I said that Bleekemolen is back in the pits again. Now that is 3 laps, which doesn't quite seem right, given that we've just gone green. 3 laps out there is that certainly makes no sense at all.
So the leader in the pit lane, a bit of drama here for the 127.
And Sebastian Bleekemolen back on his way again, or rather that car is back on its way again, without stopping for fuel. So it came in under the Code 60 to get fuel, and now has headed off again, having done just 3 laps on that stint, and he's off again.
Joe Bradley has been down to the Bleekemolen pit. Can you enlighten us, Mr. B?
Yes, I can. There's a wing. I'm trying to identify what the wing was off. The previous driver. Now, who was that?
Sebastian Bleekemolen, I think, has stayed in the car. No, I think he stayed in the car.
It was Pim van Riet.
Yes, right.
On the previous stop, Sebastian Bleekemolen took it over and then brought the car back in again.
Right. Well, Van Riet has hit something, he said, and it was still attached to the car. The wing was attached to the car. Now, if I can find...
You mean they picked up a part of someone else's car?
I'm not sure. I'm going to find out.
During the Code 60, the car came in and Sebastian Bleekemolen got into the car. Sebastian's brought the car back in again and now gone out after a very short stint. So, just the 3 laps. So...
It's come back in and they've detached something from the car. And I'm going to clarify exactly what that is.
You're walking away from your microphone, Joe.
What exactly, just tell us again, was that bodywork that I saw come off the car, was that from your car or something that you did?
My car, we have the same car. I drive also on 127.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
In the last lap for 60, there was somebody was crashed on the road. And there was some damage on the track. And
you hit the debris.
The debris, and it broke mine. Wait,
the front splitter.
Yeah.
So it was the splitter we've seen. So Sebastian went out with the car. The splitter has then become detached, and he was trailing. Yeah. So he's come in. They've ripped it off the car, and that's what I saw being carried back to the inside the garage. Yep.
7. Yeah.
Good stuff. Right, we got to the bottom of that eventually, didn't we? Great stuff.
And that extra pit stop for Bleekemolen then means that it is only just 3 laps separated from Ivo Breukers. Before that pit stop, it was separated by very nearly 4 laps. There's still 3 laps separating them in terms of which lap number they're on. Sebastian Bleekemolen on his 282nd lap, Breukers on his 279th lap. But Breukers now very much closer to Bleekemolen on the road and pretty much exactly 3 laps behind him now. And so we need to keep an eye on that. And of course, Richard Neary, who at the moment is lapping 4 seconds or so faster than Ivo Breukers, is only a lap and a bit behind the 2 Seat Leons. So we've got this lovely prospect as daylight is just around the corner, within the hour, that everything at the front is beginning to close up as the people at the very front seem to be having tiny little problems. And well, this is the time when you have to keep paying attention. And I can't remember if it was you or Johnny who asked now, what's the next drama going to be? Well, you just don't know, do you? That's the whole point.
No. What I can tell you, thanks to the clarity and superb functionality of our very, very impressive onboard cameras, is that the conditions are getting better because we're seeing less spray in the air. We're seeing the headlight beams stretch further down into the blackness of the circuit without reflecting back any spray or hanging moisture in the air. So with 10 hours and 21 minutes to go, we may be seeing just a little bit of a turn in conditions, and we'll keep a weather eye, pun intended, on the lap times to see if they start improving in the next few minutes here at the Hankook 24 Hours of Silverstone.
Just little by little, we are going to see the lap times improving. And also, of course, the advantage of the front-wheel drive cars will be less strong as the track dries out and the grip returns for the rear-wheel drive cars, which can only play surely to the strengths of Richard Neary in particular. But Phil Quaife, sorry, not Phil Quaife, is it? It's Ramsey Moutron in the number 1 car as well. Ivo Breukers is coming towards the end of his stint, I fancy.
Sorry, go ahead, Tippel.
He's done an hour and a half, but I don't know quite how much more the fuel will last. Maybe another 10 laps at most, I would say, for Ivo. And of course, that's the other thing, as the conditions improve, that the fuel will last less long. It'll be harder to do a full tank on 2 hours.
Well, good morning. If you are just joining us around the world or around the circuit here at Silverstone, John Hindorf, Paul Truswell and Graham Goodwin, editor of dailysportscar.com, has joined us as well. It's a bit early for his shift, but thank you for that, Graham. And I said this earlier on, I think it bears saying again in a race of this length. Yes, we've got laps between first, second, third, fourth, but only 10 seconds, by the way, between fourth and fifth at the moment, with Bradley Philpott putting in a storming drive in the A3 category leader, the Ultran Peugeot. But this is endurance racing as we remember it from not too long ago, and even with the gaps we're seeing here at Silverstone, we are talking minutes and not hours between these cars.
And just looking at the lap times from Richard Neary, having come out of the the code 60 period and lapping in 243s, 244s. He put a lap in at 242, then a 40, then he went out to a 45. But since then, he's been in the 40s, 41s regularly. So the last 3 laps have been very much quicker from Richard Neary. And I think that's going to see him being able to just eat into that gap between himself and Ivo Breukers, which in any case will disappear when Ivo comes in to make his pit stop, which he will do.
And am I right, from this point on, the weather forecast improves?
Yes.
It's not raining now.
It's not raining now, and it is not forecast to rain again until after the end of the race. It's not going to be sunny. There's going to be a mixture of sunny spells.
It's England, damn it.
Well, quite.
Richard Neary, meanwhile, weighs under 240, 239.398 for Richard Neary.
I thought he might be the first one to do that.
And, I've been very impressed with him through the race.
The leader, meanwhile, continues serene progress, that being Sebastian Blake-Molen in the 127.
And on the current pace, we had Richard Neary last time around 242, one before that 238, closing in 3 minutes and 4 seconds now back from Ivo Breukers. But what that means is that in about 20 seconds of a gap, he's going to unlap himself from the 303 Seat. So that's the next thing to look for, is the number 246. Will definitely get back onto that lap because Ivo Breukers due in about 10 minutes' time.
Well, exactly, and I think Ivo may well be coming in a little earlier than that because of the fuel coming down in the car.
Thank you, Paul and Graham. It is still the 127 that leads this motor race, and that has been a very long time they've been out front.
So again, looking at that gap, Richard Neary is taking time out as well as expecting that pit stop. So that is going to put, not just on the lead lap, but that's going to put the Team Abba Roll Centre car into second place.
First vestiges of daylight in the inky blue skies over Silverstone as we look backwards from Club Corner towards the eastern horizon. Sunrise officially 6:33, so some 36 minutes away. So the daylight is not too far away, but it's still headlights and signalling flags instead of signalling lights rather instead of the flags here at the 24 Hours of Silverstone. The 127 Team Bleekemolen white Seat Leon Cup racer, the TCR class leader, leads the race overall from a similar car in terms of its specification, but very orange in second place, with Ivo Brukas at the wheel of that car. It's been a good night for Team Abbott Commercial with Road Centre Racing. Richard Neri back behind the wheel. Just Richard and Martin Short, the team owner and principal, doing the nighttime wet stints. And that rear-wheel drive car has been every bit the equal of the front-wheel drive cars in difficult conditions.
Now, Ivo Brukas is due in within the next 5 or 6 minutes out of driver time, but Richard Neri is absolutely carving his way to the rear end of that 303 car. Now just a couple of seconds back to unlap himself from the second place car. Took something like 8 seconds out of the 303 on the last time around, and under 240 again. It's 244 as Ivo Brukas goes past start finish. Another 239 meantime for Richard Neri. I think he's going to make that move on this lap to put himself back onto the lap at the moment occupied by the second place Seat.
Yeah, 2 laps in the 239s then for Richard Neri, having had 2 in the 38, or 1 in the 38s and then a 39 before having a couple of slightly slower ones in between, whereas just comparing those laps with those of Ivo Brukas, in Ivo is not even broken, he's broken once into the 244s, otherwise he's been in the 245, so you know, at that kind of a rate, Neri is just hauling him in hand over fist. And more significantly, perhaps, is that he's going to start putting pressure onto the race-leading Sebastian Bleekemolen driven Team Bleekemolen car, because there's enough time left in this race to catch up.
Absolutely right.
What is only a 10-minute gap to the race leader.
And he's made that move. Richard Neri is now back onto the same lap as Ivo Brukas. So it's been a pretty spectacular early morning stint from Richard Neri.
They've driven just about 12 hours between the two of them, Richard and Martin, having done 6 stints altogether. Not quite all of them have been 2 hours, but they've been approaching 2 hours and alternating between the two of them.
And massively matter-of-fact, Richard, when he got out before Martin's last stint about, well, I just got to go out there and do it and bang the laps in.
It was almost nonchalant, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was.
And
he looked much fresher than other people we've seen getting out of cars.
He was
very Scott
relaxed.
Pruitt-like, actually. He said hello to his family.
He was relaxed behind the wheel. And I think part of the skill set that you have to get into is, I'm going to go out there and be relaxed and enjoy myself. And that's what Richard Neri managed to achieve on that stint.
Away, exceptional driving in these conditions, Rob, to have still so many cars running and so many cars running reliably and quickly. Those were horrid conditions overnight.
It's so slippery out there. I arrived on site about 40 minutes ago and just went for a quick lap around the perimeter road, and it's damp, it's greasy, it's such easy conditions to make a mistake in. And the different surfaces at Silverstone, as we were mentioning yesterday, the older surfaces are so smooth and polished that it's so hard to see and get a feel for the conditions, which is why Martin Short and Richard Neri have just been swapping between themselves. You know, when you get a feel for the conditions, just try and stay in the car.
Everybody gets tired overnight. If you do a night shift, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Those hours between sort of 2 and 6 in the morning. It's if you're at war, it's when you attack people, because that's when people's at their lowest ebb. How do you motivate yourself to try and get that concentration level that you're clearly going to need if you're going out during that graveyard shift, as we call it in the broadcast business.
Most of the drivers will wear kind of heart rate monitors, which are monitoring not only their heart rate, but also how many calories they're burning. And you've got to just keep piling the fluids and the fuel into your body. It's very easy to run out of energy, to become dehydrated. Even if it gets, to the point where you think, oh, my mouth's getting a bit dry, I could do with a drink. Your reactions have already slowed by 10%. So you've just got to keep eating. You're doing about 750 millilitres an hour in terms of sweating in a closed cockpit car. You're burning about 1,000 calories an hour, 850 to 1,000. So, yeah, you're working really hard, and it's easy just to run out of energy. So, yeah, just keep eating.
And the problem is, of course, is that when you realise you've run out of energy, it's too late.
It's a bit like dehydration. You get the headache and go, oh, no, I should have been drinking more than that.
Exactly.
The other thing that we were talking about was the discipline to bring yourself down, particularly if you're doing, as the guys in the Team ABBA commercials with Roll Centre Racing BMW are, and just swapping between the two of you, it means you've only got 2 hours before you're back in the car. So you get out, you're buzzed up, you're feeling good about yourself. You've got to go and get some rest. Whether that's sleep or not is not what we're saying, but you've got to pull yourself down and let your body recuperate and your mind recuperate as well.
2 things: shower, brush your teeth. Makes all the difference. Cold shower initially to cool down, warm the shower up slowly, get warm, get clean, smash a bit of deodorant on, change of race suit, brush your teeth, good to go. It's amazing the difference it makes. It's amazing. It really does work well.
And do you, if you're doing those quick changes, do you actually try and sleep, or do you just put yourself in a position where either you're sitting in the garage watching, or do you prefer to be away from the action and just let yourself come down gently?
It's a funny one. I personally prefer to stay in contact, in touch. So I'll just sit there, chilled out with a radio, listening to what's going on. Some other drivers, sometimes it depends who's in the car. If you trust implicitly who you're sharing with, it's very easy just to go and wind down somewhere. But if you feel, I'll just need to... Perhaps your teammate might come in the pits if he gets a stomach upset. Perhaps you just need to be readier than you might, So it really depends from circumstance to circumstance.
So it's pretty much straight back into a race suit if you know you're going to get in 2 hours down the road and just waiting in case the call comes.
Yeah, very much so. If you're next in the car, you should really be ready, so that if the driver, as I say, needs to pit unexpectedly for whatever reason, if he just has a slight bang and it tweaks the wheel and it dislocates his thumb, he's coming in. So you've got to be ready. It's
like in cricket, as soon as the guy in front of you goes out, you start padding up. You're getting ready. You're getting ready to go. It's been a good nighttime session for the 303, and again, that is a car that mostly has swapped between just a couple of drivers.
Yes, they are running strongly. I've just been doing some sums to kind of work out the significance of this 3-lap cushion which the Bleekemolen team car has been sitting on. And in effect, Richard Neary, for some reason I've kind of picked him as being the man with perhaps the most potential to catch up the gap. Even though we still have a little under 10 hours to go, I reckon he has to close at a rate of about 3 seconds a lap between now and the end of the race. And that's going to be 3 seconds a lap, not necessarily on every lap, but on average. If you can get some quicker ones in, then so be it. But it's going to have to be of that kind of an order in order to be able to get that 3-lap margin by the end of the race, which suddenly makes you think, if he's going to do 3 seconds a lap, Rob, that's actually a big ask. It's not impossible, but it's a bigger ask than... it's not that simple.
No, of course. And as the conditions begin to come back to us, you can see, looking at the pictures there, I think we've got a whiff of a drier line appearing. The difference between the lap times is going to become smaller and smaller. So as the sun begins to rise here at Silverstone, the drivers will be enjoying a little bit more daylight, but the circuit's still very slippery.
The other one that's going quickly, Rob, is the BMW.
The Roll Centre BMW last time round a 2:35, so 4 seconds quicker than our leader Sebastian Bleekemolen. So, Paul, on that prediction of being 3 or 4 seconds quicker, is ticking the boxes so far.
Well, exactly, yes. It's just a case of whether they're going to be able to continue to do that, particularly as the track gets drier and the other drivers of that car take over, because Richard and Martin are going to go off and have to have some rest, having done the last 12 hours not single-handedly, double-handedly between the two of them. And I suppose the other thing that happens, doesn't it, Rob, as we go into drier conditions, is that suddenly the SP touring cars have to think about their minimum reference lap times again, because whilst it's been wet, they've not had to worry about those, whereas the TCRs have no minimum reference lap time, so they just continue to push as hard as they can push. It'll take a while, I suspect, before we're even getting close to those kind of lap times, though, because it's not just going to have to be dry. It's going to have to be bone dry, isn't it? There's not just going to be a dry line to enable that to happen.
For sure, and the different surfaces give up the different grip levels at different times as the circuit begins to dry.
Still, this 3-lap margin up at the front, and of the leading group, it's going to be Richard Neary and, the number 1 Mermac Ogilvy racing car that come in for their respective pit stops first. And, of course, that's going to play into the hands of the 2 Seat Leons, Sebastian Bleekemolen and Bert de Huyse's cars, the Dutchman.
Richard Neary is closing down on our race leader to get a lap back as we watch the 144 Seat taking a detour around the outside of the new Grand Prix loop. But no, Richard closing down on the race leader to unlap himself again, and my crystal ball tells me that Martin Short is back into the ABBA Roll Centre car after Richard, so they're continuing that double-handed technique, if you like, of just swapping between Richard and Martin.
Yeah, poor old Charles Lamb hasn't even had a go at all yet in the car. The rain started coming down before they managed to give him a chance to have a go in it. And one wonders, depending on how exhausted Martin and Richard are, whether or not they'll just keep the 3 of them in the car thus for the rest of the race.
We've shared with, I've shared with drivers who out of choice. You give them just would you like to go in, and they kind of take a look at the sky, take a look at the road surface, and go in funny colour, and they're like, oh no, I'll perhaps wait. Yeah. And perhaps Charles is wise enough to understand that the result he'll get is far more beneficial if he allows the slightly quicker drivers, slightly more confident drivers to do this technical shift. And they're just riding on board with the 216. You can see that the conditions are still very, very slippery. And Charles just waiting till he can see, till the road surface is dry, and then perhaps he'll have a go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm nowhere near the same kind of racing driver that some of the other of my esteemed colleagues are, but I'm exactly of that type. If I'm part of the team, I'm part of the team. I've done my bit. Yes, that's great. But if it's something that I can't do, then I don't want to mess it up. And you look at the speed of reaction that you have to do. You have to have confidence that what you're going to do is going to work. And that's all. It's a certain element of wisdom you've got to have, isn't it, to make that judgment? Yeah,
very much so, very much so. And if you've been out of the car for a long time in these conditions, you're not going to know the car and know the track. As well as somebody who has been in. And look, Roll Centre have been doing this a very, very long time. Martin runs a tight ship, and I think that's been a very wise use of his driving time overnight. He knows Silverstone very well. Richard knows the car very well. So between them, they'll have shared information between them. And here we are. They're second overall. They're hunting down the leader. Last time round, almost 3 seconds a lap faster. So... there's 9.5 hours to go. We're very much game on.
Absolutely right. Yeah, and looking at the average lap times as well, 39.7 is the average from Richard Neary, 42.6. So it's 2.9 seconds on the average lap time. So it's kind of come really close towards, as I say, that 3 seconds was only a kind of a rule of thumb. It may well be that there's a tenth here or a tenth on there that will still do the trick. But it does mean that even if, and it is a big if, everybody is reliable, we still have a race on our hands. It's not a matter of praying that there's a little bit of unreliability. And one of the things that John Hindhoff was saying while we were still here, that one of the reasons perhaps that the TCRs have proved so reliable in the race thus far is that the wet weather conditions have meant there's been less stresses and strains on everything.
Of course, yes.
But as it dries out, then we might see a little bit of fragility, supposed fragility, turning up in the TCRs.
We have the Sebastian-driven race-leading TCR Seat Leon with the number 1 in the rear window there, coming through Woodcote, now being chased down by Richard Neary in the BMW behind. So, are they nose to tail? It's difficult to see with those LED Clearwater lights on the front of the ABBA roll centre car, but Bleekemolen now coming through the lap traffic, and I believe he now has only a BMW between the race leader and Richard Neary in P2. So Neary closing down to take another lap back from the race leader. Last lap round, lap time difference, over 4 seconds. It's amazing that we're really commentating on a sprint race.
Yeah.
It's door handle to door handle. We've got the Bleekemolen, Memic Ogilvy, Red Camel, Team ABBA Roll Centre in the positions they were almost 10 hours ago.
Yeah, that's right. If you would say that the last 10 laps was a sprint race, and it was purely a 2-horse race between the Bleekemolen Seat number 127 and Richard Neary in the 246 BMW, 10-lap sprint race. At the end of it, we'd have had a 33-second gap between the two of them. So just imagine a 10-lap race with Richard Neary. He'd have just disappeared off, 33 seconds ahead. So it's that kind of a margin that he's been doing, and it's been a 3.3-second gain on the last 10 laps. So it's kind of on schedule, but of course we do have the prospect of fairly imminent pit stops for both Richard Neary and Sebastian Bleekemolen, and of course then it's handing the car over to somebody else, it's giving a different driver into the car, he's got to get himself settled in, he's got to get dialed in, and then, as you've described, we've got the problem of knowing when, how to use the wet weather tyres, when to switch them to the dries. It's not going to be just yet, because of as you say, it's so cold. But you've got to get the best out of the tyres, and that may well mean moving the car around on the circuit to keep them clean, to keep them cool. So lots to think about then as the leading 2 cars approach their pit stop. In fact, the 3 of the leading 4 cars, you say Ramsey Moutran is going to be most likely the first one to pit. He has currently done 34 laps in this current stint. Richard Neary is on his 29th lap, and Sebastian Bleekemolen is actually only on his 22nd, because remember at this beginning of this stint they had that problem with I don't know if you were here at that point, were you, Rob?
Still no sign of a dry line as such, and it was interesting to look at the Team Ultram pit stop. We saw the car stay on wet tyres, no sign of slicks, and it would be a brave man to put slicks on. Even though there's no standing water as such on the racing line, the ambient temperature, you would really struggle to get any heat in a set of slicks. And of course the slicks that Hankook provide for this type of endurance racing, they're not a super soft compound sprint tyre, very much a strong durable compound. Speaking of lap times, they're really starting to come down now. Very few people in the 2-minute 30s, but Richard Neary's last lap a 2:33. So that's much quicker than he's been going previously. He and Bradley Philpott have been around the quickest, but no, Richard really now starting to stretch his legs in that BMW M3 V8 running to the SP Touring regs.
And looking at Richard Neary, again, comparing his last 10 lap times with the last 10 lap times of Sebastian Bleekemolen, 3.1 seconds the average lap time difference between them. So it was one of those calculations I should never do because I'll probably turn out to be wrong, but he's on schedule for it, so I'll keep an eye on it. And generally something bizarre happens that completely wrecks the whole plan. But
sure, we've still got 9 hours to go.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
Amazing. We're thinking about tenths of a second, and there's still 3 Blancpain Endurance Series races left to run.
Now, a question about the refuelling, because we're coming to the end of Richard Neary's stint at the moment. And one of the things I've noticed, since they've been doing these 2-hour single stints, no refuelling in the middle of it, which they've been able to do during the wet weather with the fuel consumption being a little bit better, their pit stop times have been significantly longer. Now, presumably, that's been because of more fuel having to go into the car. It takes longer to do. Through a pistol grip, presumably it's a fairly slow refuelling process. So in terms of time spent in the pits, it all gets eaten up putting fuel in. And of course, the longer you've been, or the longer your co-driver has been before you, the longer you have to spend there. And as I say, I think that's where, so just looking back at the recent pit stops for the 246 car, has spent much longer in the pits on its most recent pit stops. Maybe they've been doing extra work in the garage, in front of the garage as well, which has added to the pit stop time. But they've been up in the 5-minute kind of range, which is not going to protect them when they comes to their pit stop from Bert de Hoijs taking over second place again. What I was wondering is whether that nearly 4-minute margin that Richard Neary has built up between himself and the 303 Seat, whether that would be enough to keep him in second place when he comes in for his pit stop. But I don't think it's going to be, because there are quite long pit stops from the BMW now.
Sebastian Bleekemolen has reacted to that change in pace from Richard Neary as well. I'm sure his team will have informed him that the BMW started to go a wee bit quicker and have asked Sebastian to experiment with the road surface and try and find a bit more grip.
Unless they were just listening to me saying that he's going to get caught.
True.
So Sebastian Bleekemolen, as you say, yes, fastest lap of his current stint done in the 310th lap, the one before the one that he's currently on, at 336.334 for the race leader, 127.
We're looking at a relatively warm road surface there as we see the Team Brit car losing a lap to that flying roll centre BMW of Richard Neary.
Richard Neary on his 41st lap now of the stint. Last time he came into the pits at the end of his 41st lap, and we already have the race leader into the pits, as well as Bradley Philpott with the Peugeot. Richard Neary, meanwhile, is halfway around his lap and will be then coming in. There they are. It's
front splitter on the race leader. Looks good to me.
It's in perfect nick, doesn't it? So maybe somebody was misleading Joe, or Joe got the wrong end of the stick, but that looks in good nick, doesn't it? Away they go.
So Richard Neary coming round to complete his lap as Sebastian Bleekemolen makes his way down to the fuel station.
And that will mean that for a moment Richard will be, it'll still be 3 laps of a difference, won't it? Richard will be coming up to 310 laps as Bleekemolen completes his 314th lap.
So the race leader of the Hankook 24 Hours of Silverstone makes his way into the fuel bay. Richard Neary makes his way through Woodcut, or is he coming into the pits? So P2 is into the pit lane as well now. So one car into fuel. Richard Neary making his way to the roll centre pit box for a routine change.
Interesting.
I was just going to say he'll be handing back to Martin Short again, so they're going to continue the pattern of Neary Short,
which, as I say, yeah, at some point he's going to, and they not necessarily have to change because they're both experienced drivers, and it may well be that they feel more comfortable, and depends what the rest of the team decide to do, and indeed what conditions do as well, as to whether it dries more quickly or more slowly. But just comparing the stint lengths, 41 laps, as I said, from Richard Neary, compare that to Sebastian Bleekemolen, who wasn't desperately tight on his time, but his stint was just 36 laps. So perhaps the BMW getting slightly better fuel consumption than Sebastian Bleekemolen. Just Richard Neary still in the refuelling area, and just trying to monitor the progress of Bert de Hoys in the 303 Seat, the Dutch Seat, the Broikers family Seat. He's just coming through Woodcote at the moment, and Richard Neary still in the fueling area. Now, we'll be watching to see when Richard, the light, there goes the 303 across the line now. Richard Neary still in the refueling area, so the second place is going to change again, but it's going to be a lot less than it was on the previous time when the orange 303 was in second place. And in a sense, it gives Richard Neary now something physical to go for, because when he does come out, it's taking a long time to refuel it, isn't it? Richard Neary's still not out. When he does come out, he'll have somebody to go for.
And that man he's going for is Melvin de Groot. His co-driver, Sebastian Bleekemolen, is down with Bruce.
Sebastian, you look as though you've just been for a drive in the country. Feeling fresh or feeling bad inside?
Well, it's getting light now, so that's much better. But we survived the night, which is good, and the pace was perfect. We were quickest on the track most of the time, and we have a big gap between P2. Only the BMW is catching us up a bit because he's a bit quicker on the. Yeah, it's getting dry now, and yeah, he has more power on the rear. And well, when it's dry, I think we have the same pace again. Only we can drive a bit shorter because our fuel uses.
The black and green BMW you talk of, the ABBA commercials, you know they've just been using two drivers through the night. So one of their drivers hasn't even gone in the car yet. So Martin Short and Richard Neary, they're going to have to take time sitting down soon.
Well, I think they can continue, but it would be nice if their third driver would also do some laps. No, they were really quick, and I think that their strategy was okay as well. We were a bit lucky with the code 60s and our pit stops. Yeah, let's see how we went up, but for now it looks perfect.
Yeah, it's looking good. Sebastian, thank you.
As I've settled into the timing screen as I came back into the box, I've been looking not only at the flying lap times but also the out lap times, and Martin Short's out lap was a 7:32. Nabil Moutram was over 8.5 minutes, so Martin really getting up to speed in that BMW quickly shows the advantage of knowing the circuit conditions, not being out of the car for too long. So the roll centre plan of just circulating two drivers, not only making a difference to their flying lap times, but also to the out laps as well. The drivers can get up to speed as quick as they can.
I didn't see a lot of places on the track where there was a great amount more water offline, and I was quite focused on just trying to squeeze the most out of the car the whole time. My tyres weren't really degrading. The car seems to be really good on its tyres, obviously front left limited. So as long as you're just smooth getting on the gas, I was just keeping them at roughly the right temperature, I think, anyway. So we weren't really working hard to cool them. But maybe that'll happen more now Guillaume's in the car and the track gets even drier.
Awesome. Okay, thank you very much. So as we watch Martin Short then making his way up to a line of traffic ahead of him, gives us a challenge in terms of where he's going to position his cars as he comes through Maggots and Beckett's. So he's up behind the leader. So what we're looking at now is Martin Short taking a lap from the leader and cutting that gap down now at the head of the race. Martin Short continuing to circulate around. He's the quickest man on the track. 2 minutes 35 his last lap time against the leader's 2 minutes 38. So Paul Trustwell's prediction of the Roll Centre car has to be 3 seconds a lap quicker than the Dutch Seat is continuing to work its way out as the 303 car comes past me to complete his 316th lap here of Silverstone. We're looking to complete over 500 laps, which is an enormous distance around the Northamptonshire venue.
I don't think Evo did recognise the fact that the other Seat is so far ahead that they're not going to be able to catch it. But I do think it is within the capability of the BMW to
on
catch.
Pace.
If it's purely on pace and if it's everything's reliable, then it's certainly doable. The problem, of course, and I think Bruce recognised this when he was doing his interview for the BMW, is that they have another 2 drivers back in the garage who haven't got to get in the car. There's nothing that compels them to get in the car, but probably they feel they ought to. And I think it'll depend on whether the reliability of the other cars ahead of them stays.
Well, the gap I've been watching exactly the same gap, but the gap I'm looking at is that kind of bogey 10 minutes. And towards the end of Richard Neary's stint, and what a great stint that was, he got the gap to the leader under 10 minutes. Martin Short has been working that gap after the time lost for a longer pit stop to the BMW. And that gap, first to third now, getting down towards the 10-minute mark. It's, what is that, 9 minutes? It's about 10 minutes and 20 seconds, but Martin consistently taking 3 to 4 seconds out of the leader, as you were saying a little earlier, Paul, sticking to that schedule. So it's not going to be that long, and we're not halfway into, we're only 22 minutes into Martin Short's 2-hour stint. Presumably he goes the full way here. And that is going to be a chunk of time out if there are no problems for the number 246 car.
Yes, I mean, he's done 8 laps as Martin on this stint, and that gives him an average of 2:36.2 on those 8 laps, whereas the race leader in the same 8 laps, although we saw Melvin de Groot getting into the car a little bit earlier, he has done an average lap time of... we've paused whilst the computer works it out for me. 2 minutes 39.4, so the delta is still 3.2 seconds a lap.
Well, and he's sticking to it. And
Martin Short doing just as well as Melvin de Groot. And as Richard Neary did before him.
Indeed, 2:34.8 last time around for Martin Short's quickest lap I can remember seeing for a little wee while. And this boding well for a busy season for this pair. Also taking part full season, of course, in the British GT Championship, and next Barwell BMW Z4 GT3. So that's, I think, looking very good for those two.
Exactly. The other thing that's happening, of course, is that the assumption I'm making is, A, that conditions are going to stay the same, B, we're not going to get any, I shouldn't say it, code 60 periods, and indeed we've been running now for more than 2 hours, 2 hours and 8 minutes since the last code 60, and that's almost as long as the period of green flag running as we've had in the entire race. We had 2 hours and 19 minutes at the beginning of the race, green flag running, and we're getting close to that at the moment, and as long as it remains green, then that means that people can run at the full pace. The only thing that Martin Short, Richard Neary and the rest of the team have to bear in mind is that as it dries completely, they are going to be constrained by that minimum reference lap time. They're not going to be allowed to go underneath 2 minutes 18. Now, whether they actually will do that or not, whether the track will allow them is what I mean, is a moot point, because I think it's going to take a long time to get down to 2 minutes 18 type of conditions out there.
Well, we're getting very much into full daylight. That removes some of the risk out there of disorientation we saw in the worst of conditions. So that gap at the front again. Martin Short takes a solid 3 seconds plus out of Bert de Huys in the battle for second position. Under 25 seconds now, that gap. And the gap to the leader for Short coming down just 10 seconds over the 10-minute mark now. And these will be the kind of targets I'm sure that Shorty's setting for himself.
Yes, I do hope he's done his own calculation, though, and he doesn't just come to me afterwards and said, do you know what, I needed to take 2.5 seconds a lap out, and I still would have done it. But as I say, the other thing, the other milestone, if you will, is just looking at how long the number 127 has been in the lead of the race, because he's not far short, pardon the pun, of being 12 hours in the lead of the race.
We are talking about substantial gaps, the lead to second, but Martin Short powering towards the back end of the 303 car. That gap now 21 seconds last time around. It will be the 303 car that needs to pit first. An hour and 22 minutes on the stint for Bert de Huys, just 30 minutes, half an hour behind the wheel this time around for Martin Short, but he's continuing to will hack time out of that. There's a further 3 seconds already out of the gap. And with just around half an hour on Martin Short's stint, he now brings the lead gap first to third under 10 minutes for the first time since it's been back in the car. That was the mark that only happened for Richard Neary towards the very end of his stint.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a line on my little graph, if you want to look down there. There's that line. As that line comes closer down, that's the progress that's being made. What Martin hasn't managed to do is to actually overcome the pit stop yet. As you say, from before the time, he's getting very close to that point where he's closer than Neary was before his pit stop. I think what will happen first, though, is that Martin will be able to make up sufficient ground on Bert de Hoijs to be able to get past him before de Hoijs makes his pit stop. That'll be the interesting one. Of course, that will just inspire Martin more and more. If he's got a target that he can aim for, if he's got a car that he can see, and of course, getting past de Hoijs before de Hoijs makes his pit stop will be a bit of a motivational factor as well for Martin. Just one factor which I didn't actually pick out before. Part of the reason why Martin Short has got his work cut out in closing this gap down to the 10 minutes is the fact that he spent 50 seconds longer in the pit lane. And that is a factor which has repeated itself since that car, the BMW, has been doing these long stints. It's taking an awful lot longer to do the refuelling.
So more fuel.
But that fuel is going in relatively slowly because it's just an ordinary pistol grip. So if you can get the fuel economy, then that does give you quite an advantage in terms of pit stop time. Even if you can't go as long on your stint, you are getting advantage because you're being able to put the fuel in more quickly when you get to the pit stop time.
That's the first lap I've seen since Martin got into the car that he's taken anything less than 3 seconds out of Bert de Hoijs. It's 14.2 seconds is the gap now, but quicker again this time. So Martin managing traffic on that last lap around. 327 laps under the wheels of the leader, 323 laps under the wheels of the chasing pair.
And although that sounds like 4 laps, it's only 3 because, as I say, both Bert de Hoijs and Martin Short will come around before Melvin de Groot does, and therefore it'll go down to 324 against 327. In terms of total time spent in the pits, interesting to compare, the team Bleekemolen Seat has spent 40 minutes and 4 seconds in the pit lane, whereas the Roll Centre team ABBA BMW has spent 45 minutes and 24 seconds in the pits. So 5 minutes and 20 seconds more spent in the pits. And if you consider that's 2 laps and some.
And on top of that, I think I'm right. I'm sure you can correct me if not. Then I think the 127 has spent a greater proportion of those minutes on the pit lane under Code 60 conditions than the Roll Centre car, which accounts for the remainder of the difference.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's neither car, even though they've spent more time in the pits, neither car has had a particular problem that they had to fix whilst they were in the pits. But the Seat has just been that little bit more efficient, both of them having done 13 pit stops. The 303 Seat has only done 9 pit stops and has spent just 36 minutes and 48 seconds in the pit lane.
So the difference there is more or less all about pace on track. With the gap now, Martin Short is going to be able to see that car on the Hangar Straights very soon, if not already. 11 seconds now the gap for the 246 car to the 303 ahead group, the 235 numbered BMW 235. You see now Martin Short going around the task of catching, overhauling the second place 303 car.
Good looking livery as well, isn't it?
It is.
Martin was ever one to put together a good looking car, but it
has to offset the looks of the driver. This is the thing.
It's fundamentally a very simple pattern, but very eye-catching, and if anything, drawing attention to the ABBA commercials sponsorship down the side because of that simplicity. You're not kind of staggered by all the colours on the car. You just your attention is drawn to it, and then to the words on the side of the car, which is what it's all about, isn't it?
And yeah, absolutely, and matched by the team's BMW Z4 GT3 for the British GT Championship this year. So it will become a look, I'm sure, that becomes very familiar indeed throughout 2016 to followers of good racing. And we're watching more of it now. Shorty now 5 seconds back, and that means that at current pace he's going to be with the second place car at the end of this lap.
So Bert de Hoijs, an hour and a half into his stint, he's done now 35 laps on the stint. This is the car, of course, that Rick Breukers took out right at the start of the race and did some 47 laps in.
On board now with Bert, he's got Martin Short a second and a half back as they cross the line, and Shorty, I'm sure, will have taken the advantage as well through the little bit of traffic. Bit of a wobble there for the 303, and I think if we get the right shot, we're going to see bright headlights of the black and green ABBA Commercials Roll Centre Racing BMW right to the rear of this car, looking for a way past, which would be for second position overall. 9 minutes and 40 seconds back now from the overall leader.
And Bert taking to the right-hand side of the track as they went down the Hanger Straight now. Whether that was to keep the tyres cool and be on the wetter side of the track, or whether it was just to stop Martin coming up on the inside of him, we didn't see, because we didn't see out of the back window of that car. We only could see out of the front window. But you're absolutely right. Martin Short, as we predicted he would, closing in before de Hoijs makes his pit stop.
But now beginning to work the lead gap as well as the gap to second. Shorty. And we wait to see which of the drivers will get in next. I suspect we're going to see one of the other two drivers, whether it's Charles Lamb or the remonikered Darren Cox, back aboard.
Although on the other hand, Shorty would have then done one more stint than Neary. Although you could count Neary's opening stint at the beginning of the race as an extra stint.
Well, I just wonder whether or not Richard might do the final stint of the race.
I see, the final stint of the race.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, yep, that's... I mean, certainly it's going to dry. I mean, Martin's still got an hour in the car, hasn't he? So conditions will improve in the next hour. And, yeah, might be good enough to let DC out.
Sufficiently close together that the times popped up for Sector 2 absolutely the same moment, so either nose to tail or side by side as they come to complete the lap. We'll see them by us within the next 10 or 12 seconds.
Less than that, there they go.
And there he goes.
Shorty's ahead.
He is fairly substantially
2
ahead.
seconds. 2.3, sorry.
And in their bargain, by the way, taking a 3.5 seconds out of the leader too. So the gap now, 9 minutes and 36 seconds between Melvin de Groot and Martin Short.
And of course, talking of where we started this thing, we shouldn't forget that that BMW Martin Short's driving started from the very last row of the grid, some 15, nearly 16 hours ago. That was right at the back of the grid, so apart from anything else, it's had to fight its way up from all the way back there.
Martin Short through this time in a 2:32.3, so quicker again for Shorty, taking 4.5 seconds out the lead of that time. 9 minutes 31 seconds is now the posted gap. And another fine stint from the Team ABBA with Roll Centre Racing squad.
Although thus far the longest stint that's been done by the race leading car, number 127, has been 36 laps. 38 laps Melvin de Groot did earlier on, whereas the BMW has done 41 laps. So the actual range is greater on the BMW, but they seem to pay a penalty on that by having longer pit stops while they put that extra fuel into the car.
So it's at one of those phases of the race where we've got a bit more long range in our predictions here, which is aided beautifully by the timing and scoring screens. It's a joy to watch these cars being pushed, and particularly in these tricky conditions. They've got to certainly have their sensible heads screwed on here. Martin Short pulling away from Bert de Hoys at will just now, down to 2:30 now from Martin Short. That's 6 seconds out of the lead.
But interestingly, Bert de Hoys still lapping faster than the race leader.
Correct.
So it's not as if Hoys is going slowly. No. They're both going quickly. They're both catching the leader, but Martin doing so at a much faster rate.
The ruthless efficiency of this package matched up against the brute force and attacking style of the 246 car. Richard Neary and Martin Short taking charge in attacking stints through the night hours, where we've seen very poor weather indeed. Lots of incident drama, lots of cars finding the gravel traps in the darkness. So with 8 hours of this race remaining, it's the Team Blaker Molen car, the 127 Seat Leon Cup racer, leading the race overall, and the TCR class, of course. 3 laps to the good ahead of the number 246 car, this Team ABBA with Roll Centre Racing car, leading SP Touring and leading the attack too. Been enjoying this run from the team into daylight. Pulling away now from the 3rd place car, and second in TCR, the 303 Red Camel Jordans.nl Seat Leon, now in the hands of Bert de Hoys.
So Hankook 24 from Silverstone, daylight and the semblance of a dry line finally.
Poor old Roll Centre Racing, they can't afford tyres with grips anymore, I'm afraid. They've got some that have got absolutely no grip cut into them at all. They just told me to be quiet. I just happened to be standing here, and Ricky Bobby's watching from the front of the pit garage, but they thought, well, who should be the guinea pig for trying slick tyres? Well, of course, it's Martin Short, so he's staying on board. Can't see if he's smiling or if he's crying in the cockpit, but yes, we were talking a while ago, and Paul was reckoning it might be 2 hours, but looking at the pace that the 246 BMW has had, Richard Neary's even helping to roll the tyres out for the front of the car. From behind the line, he's shouting to me, of course he is, but of course this is a car that's risen up to 2nd place and is the fastest car out there. It could be even faster, but the next few laps for Martin Short are going to be very, very interesting, but he could be out there still under code 60 unless they're putting fuel on. Let's see how long the code 60 takes before it runs out, but slick tyres for the first time since the rain came down in the evening.
The 246 car is out there fueling at the moment on slicks. We don't know, do we, whether or not the 127 followed suit? We do know it got new brakes.
No, I think that's on wets. I think the 127 is on wets. And
by the way, that's also Martin Short taking one of those laps back.
Martin Short now with half his fuel load, having been put aboard the M3. He goes now, gets the wave as the 303 goes into the pit lane. You know what?
This is a top 3 one shot there.
Super elegant solution of how to keep costs down, not have to have fuel rigs, not worry about fire in the pit lane, is to have this. And it's been a feature of the 24 hours here since James Tucker did the first 24 hours in 2005. When the fuel stop was at the other end of the pit lane. And if you remember, Paul, they even at one stage had lights to show how many pumps were available when you came under bridge, through Bridge Corner, and then you peeled off. That shows you how long ago
right. It was in the old
circuit.
It was in the old national, in front of the BRDC, wasn't it?
Yep.
With the mobile fuel unit.
The old Grand Prix circuit. Yeah, I wasn't actually here that year in 2005, but it does mean that Martin Short, as you were just saying, Graham, is now 2 laps and a lot behind the race-leading Seat number 127, rather than being 3 laps and a bit, which is what it was before.
Martin just reminding one of the other cars what 60 looks like.
That's the 173 car, which had an engine change overnight, remember, after comprehensively coating the circuits. This was the car that caused Martin to come back and say the circuit was ruined with the fire underneath the car after losing its oil.
Yeah, he'd be looking at that and think, hang on a minute. I know, hang on a second. It's all right. He wouldn't have recognised it because at the time he thought it was a Seat and not a Honda. And now it's the daylight. He won't remember that now. No, absolutely not. So the Hankook 24 hours at Silverstone is under full course control, code 60 here.
So Martin Short's got 48 minutes available to prove whether or not this is the right move.
Well, yes, a maximum thereof.
Because what he won't want to do is to put either Charles Lamb or indeed Ricky Bobby, a.k.a. Darren Cox, back out.
Let's just call him Darren Cox because that's his given name.
Yeah. Darren just checking, I gather, with air traffic control locally to make sure there's no helicopters to distract him on his first lap.
That was the best racing driver excuse of all time. Did you hear this, Bob?
No, tell me.
I was on my fastest lap when I was distracted by Lawrence Tomlinson's helicopter landing in my line of sight. Shame on you, Mr. Cox.
Yes.
Put that on a T-shirt.
Yes. Oh well.
I think it's Racing Driver Book of Excuses, page 131.
It's in the supplementaries.
Oh, it's the supplementaries, is it? Yeah.
I seem to recall the 216 being on that list as well, but I may be incorrect.
So I'm just going to... Let's just quickly recap on the situation then. A number of cars have been... And I've said this all through the weekend, but Silverstone are very, very good on their noise monitoring. They have... a drive-by meter which takes a picture of any offending cars and shows the meter reading as well. It's 102 dB here. Go ahead, Bruce, down in the pit lane.
Well, they're just flagging away 205, but Marshall just come up and suggested they can get 208 out of the garage, so they needed 205 to get out of the way. So suddenly it's all scrambled down at Team Altran, and hopefully that means it's going back into the race. Luckily, they had a driver on board.
While we wait for that to come around, I can tell you that on his slick tyres, and albeit without much heat in the tyres yet, Martin Short 7 seconds a lap slower than the leader. So at the moment, plan B, with the slick tyres for the chasing 246 car, is not bearing fruit, but let's wait and see if that starts to come down.
Yes, I think it's too early yet to, because that's his first flying lap, isn't it? But it may well be that the slicks will take longer to get up to temperature, and of course all he's been doing is sitting at 60 kilometres an hour.
So whilst Motors TV are away from the race for a couple of hours, you can keep up with the race there as things are hotting up at the front end of the field, and it looks to me, Graham, now that we are getting much, much closer to the crossover point. It may have been that Roll Centre and the ABBA Commercials car have gone a bit early, but it can't be that much further away, with everybody hunting for the wetter patches of the track, albeit with new wet tyres on.
Slight problem, of course, is that Martin's only just got a half an hour left on this driving stint, and then is likely going to have to put one of the less experienced drivers in.
But what it does do is allows them to make a more informed choice. Martin's going to keep the car on the island. OK, he might lose some time, but there's no speculation about whether they stay on slicks or go back to wet. The 303 car is now sliding around quite significantly in the middle part of the corner. It's the Hankook 24 hours at Silverstone. 4 o'clock this afternoon is the finish. 7.5 hours still to go, and Motors TV leaving us for a couple of hours. www.24hseries.com. It is still the 127 of Team Blake & Molan that leads from Martin Short aboard the Roll Centre BMW in second position.
Paul, I think, has noticed something very interesting leading into that Code 60 period, and actually we're now getting to the stage where Martin Short is equaling or bettering the pace of the lead car, if not the third place car, certainly the lead car quicker last time around. But Paul, leading into that Code 60, something rather interesting.
Well, yes, Martin was certainly able to make up some ground during the Code 60. Now, I noticed you were wagging your finger at him at one point, John, so I'll say no more about that. But certainly if you look at the gaps before they went into Code 60 and the gaps as they came out of the Code 60, then Martin Short was closer to the 127 car. And admittedly, during that Code 60, they did both make pit stops. So I suppose one part of it could be that they spent less time in the pits. We can check.
Remember, Paul, they took discs on the Seat.
Yes. So the pit
on the 127.
Yes, that's right. The pit stop time for the Seat was 6 minutes and 39 seconds as opposed to 3 minutes and 58 seconds for the BMW. So that's where most of that time came from. Rather than it being done on the track under Code 60, the bit that was done in the pits under Code 60 was where the roll centre car made up a lot of its ground.
And the net result of that is, we were talking, weren't we, about a 10-minute gap being worked leading into the Code 60. It was about 9.5 minutes by the time they came in. It's now 8 minutes 11 seconds, and the pace of the roll centre car is now better than the two wet tired shod first and third placed Seat Leon Supercopas.
They may have timed this spot on. They could have probably waited a little bit longer, but then they would have had to bring the car in again. I think the roll of the dice tells me all I need to know about the roll centre ABBA Commercials team. I think these guys realise they're in with a sniff of the victory here, and they are not settling for being conservative. That is not a conservative choice. They want to be able to say with some certainty in about 30 minutes time, when Martin has to come into the pit lane, to whoever gets in, right, you're getting a set of slicks, and you've got to make do with them, and you've got to keep it on the island.
And for the moment, if the other teams feel the need to respond, they will need to make an extra pit stop to do so.
Exactly right. And this may be as much about putting pressure on the other teams to jump as jump themselves, because they've only got this window before the car is back in again. If it was the wrong choice, as I said before, it's a smart decision, because if this had been the wrong choice, Paul, they had to come in again at the end of Shorty's time.
127 in the pit, the leader is in the pit.
Now, this is
to go to slicks.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
It's come to, they've realised what Shorty's done, and they've thought, well, if he can go that, then we can do that. Let's get it onto slicks as soon as we can. And having just recalculated the pace at which Martin has to make up ground, it's down to 2.7 seconds per lap. John.
And a rooted set of Hancocks off the front end of the 127. Now, you can't mix tyres, so it is either a brand new set of wets, or I'm pretty certain a new set of slicks that have gone. But those tyres that came off the front end of that car in particular were absolutely rooted.
And it could be proven that if this all goes to plan now for Roll Centre Racing, that could have been just a spark of genius in strategic terms, couldn't it, for so many different reasons.
As soon as we saw the 303 car flat sliding through the middle of the corner in the way that we saw it, I was pretty certain that they had got it right. It's never going to look good to start with, and everybody now hunting for damper patches.
Just looking roughly where the Roll Centre car is on the circuit. We've just had the 127 car clear Sector 2 on its outlap. I don't think Martin Short is terribly far behind that. He's not, and takes another 5 seconds out of that car. So there's another lap in this for the 246 car pretty soon at that sort of pace.
Yeah. Yes, that's right, because what will happen first is that 127 goes through and completes 346 laps, just does that, as I say, the sentence. Martin is coming through, just coming out of Woodcote at the moment to complete his 344th lap. So it's 2 laps and a little bit, whereas before that pit stop, it was, remember, very nearly 3 laps.
Pit lane for the 303, Rick Breukers
246 car, around 10 seconds on the road behind the 127 at the moment, but was, 3 seconds quicker through, 3.5 seconds quicker through Sector 1. So, yes, the 127 car will be getting those tyres up to temperature, but Martin Short on a charge at the moment to get that gap under 2 laps, Paul Trustwell.
It's just a matter of doing what you can, isn't it? I mean, I don't for a moment suppose that Martin is saying, oh, I need to be getting 2.7 seconds a lap or 3 seconds a lap or 3.5 seconds a lap. Therefore, this is the speed I'll go at. I'll go at how fast I can go and see how quickly I can catch up.
Hello to Dominic Window, enjoying the race in Australia, and Nick Holland back with us saying, always appreciate a strategy call that forces your competitor to make a response. Well played, Roll Centre. Completely agree.
Very much so.
Now, in the same camera shot now, the green and black of the Roll Centre racing car.
Just one car between the two now, John. Let's not forget, this is not for the lead. This is for the Roll Centre racing car to go under 2 laps down. It's got better part of 2 laps back, Paul, under strategy.
1 lap back as a result of the pit stop that was made, and it was a short pit stop, whilst the pads were changed on the Seat, the 127 car, and then another lap back. Discs were changed on the Seat, and then another lap back as a result, pretty much of a whole lap back, as a result of the 127 car having to come into the pits to go onto slicks without the benefit of the code 60.
Chris Suku tuned in to us this morning. I'm not sure whether he's listening on 16 or 2 a.m. as he heads down to Potters Bar Camera Fair. I know he's starting his journey from not too far away from us, and the atmospheric conditions should be conducive to a bit of skip on the AM, or whether he's tuned in via www.24h series or radiolemans.com. Martin Short now really pushing along. 2:35.1 last time around, Graham.
And Dennis de Burst not happy on these slicks, weaving to try and get heat into it. That's not going to help. Martin Short going up the inside past the wing.
And that is a lap back. That is a lap taken back, and Shorty will realise, but he's gone wide and holds on to it just. The problem that Dennis de Bost is going to have, that is not such an issue on the BMW, is he'll get the fronts up pretty quickly, but the backs are going to be like rocks at the moment, and the back end of that 127 Seat is going to be frisky.
And the other thing, of course, Martin Short's had 10 laps on his slicks, so they're nice and warmed up, whereas Dennis is still on his first flying lap. He's done his out lap, he's on his first flying lap on his slicks. And remember, the first couple of laps from Martin weren't that quick.
Weren't that great.
Dennis, don't wave when you've got someone alongside you. Well, it's quick in a straight line, though, that 127, even though he didn't get a good exit from the loop and Aintree, was still able to hold a similar car behind him. So Shorty then, that's another lap back, so that's 1 and quite a lot now he's behind. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure.
It's a technical term.
I'm not so sure Race Control are going to be very happy with Dennis de Burst. He's done that 2 or 3 times now with the car clearly quicker than him in the current conditions. He's weaved in front of them, trying to get the heat into his tyres.
I don't think he's trying to hold the car back.
Completely certain he's not, but that doesn't avoid the point. He is weaving on track ahead of another car that has been alongside him.
Yeah. There is the leading Blake Molan car. Team Blake Molan. And
the number 1 car, Nabil Moutran, brings in the Memak Ogilvy Dual Racing car in from 5th position now. That almost certainly will be the same again, serving up a dose of slicks. It's the 125 car trying to get by 127 here.
Stint time 1:43 for Shorty, so coming towards the end of the stint. Now the question, there's a couple of questions for me on this. Is number 1, who are they going to slot into the 246 car in 10 minutes time, and number 2, are they confident enough now that they can put another set of handguards on, or leave the tyres on that Shorty has put some heat into and put a heat cycle through? That's the question. Let's see if we can get some answers. Bruce Jones is down in the ABBA commercials with Roll Centre Racing Pit.
I'm with Charles Lamb, who's wearing his race suit, which is a good side, because so far, Charles, no racing for you yet.
Yes, I mean, we're a bit unlucky on the timing of the early stints, and basically Darren got out for his first stint, and then the rain was due in, and we decided to change strategy at that point. Richard and Martin have been doing all the wet running, and now it's drying out quite nicely, and hopefully at the end of the stint.
Of course, Martin Short was the first one to go onto slicks. Quite a bold manoeuvre. He's making it pay right now, and other people having to follow. So how keen is he going to be to relinquish the car? He's enjoying it.
Well, you know, I think he'll be keen because he'll be tired because he's been racing all night. But effectively, we were the first, I think, onto slicks. And the first few laps were a little bit tentative because it took a long time to get the heat into the tyres. But now they're warmed up nicely, and we're slightly ahead of the curve at this point. So I think we've got some advantage from that strategy. So it's been good.
And providing it continues to dry out, I presume we're going to carry on with slicks and go for another set, because we're looking at some more rain tyres, I think, behind you. I think they just happen to be there.
Yeah, I think they're there as standby in case Martin wasn't happy with the slicks, but essentially there's no more rain forecast, so we're expecting a dry race from here on, and it'll just get drier and drier, hopefully, which will be good for us.
Now, it's worth pointing out, Charles, you raced this car at Barcelona last year, but you're quite short on Silverstone experience.
Yeah, I'm effectively a Silverstone rookie. They've changed this circuit so many times. I think the last time I raced here was in Martin's Mosler back about 13 years ago when the track was actually very different. So it's another new track effectively for me. So I've had a few laps in practice, and we did a test a couple of weeks ago. So I've had some good laps, and I've got down some reasonable time. So I'm reasonably comfortable in the dry, but I've not been around here in the wet yet. So, you know, we haven't done that one.
Sky's looking all right. Your time's coming. Thanks, Charles Lamb.
With the story at the front of the race, two significant things in the last couple of minutes there, John. First of which is the 246 car in that charge has put a lap on the third place car. The second thing is...
Well, that car's just done an extra pit stop as well, don't
forget. Yes, but it passed it on track,
right?
As Rick Bloke brought the car back out. The second thing is, we were talking, weren't we, not that long ago about getting that gap to the lead down under 10 minutes and then 8 minutes. It's 5 minutes now because of the progress that's been made with strategy, with a little bit of luck maybe at the time of the code 60 for Martin Short last time around, but this is cracking stuff.
The issue that I see possibly happening now, which kind of might affect things in the SP Touring class, is that, don't forget, Martin Short and his team are constrained by the minimum reference lap time. As it gets drier, the more that is going to become relevant, whereas the TCR cars can go as fast as they can go. There's not going to be any case of them having to check what their lap times are, and that might yet, if it gets dry, fully dry, and we get down to the 219s, 218s, might yet be a constraining factor.
And it's a 218.0
for Martin Short.
But nobody's beaten that yet.
No.
Yeah.
Including the TCR cars.
218.2 from the leader, 218.2 from Shorty's car, 219.5 from the third place Rick Broikers, 218.4 by the number one car in fifth position. They're having a quiet but sensible run at the moment, the Matt Ogilvy team.
And we're going to see the Roll Centre car on pit road in the next 10 minutes because Martin Short is running out of driving time.
Yeah, but I think the experiments worked, and this is where they've effectively they've made themselves the game in hand, if you will, the pit stop in hand, because they've forced everyone else to take the pit stop that they're about to take now, so they're going to be no worse off than they were when we came off code 60.
Yeah, and I won't accept that people say, oh, they were lucky they got the safety car, they got the code 60 just when they needed it. They got the code 60 at exactly the same time as everybody else did. They made the call to put slicks on the car, nobody else did. Everybody else came into the pits at that point, everybody else could have put slicks on, they didn't. So it wasn't that Roll Centre got lucky, it was that Roll Centre made a very, very risky but a very, very good call, and it turned out that the risk that they took was a calculated one. It wasn't a gamble, it was a calculated one. It gave them the options they needed, and it's left them, I mean, they've got this, as I say, small matter of 7 hours to go in the race, but it's left them in a much stronger position than they were an hour ago. Let's just leave it at that.
And 1 hour and 53 minutes at the moment at the wheel for Martin Short. So 5 minutes or so, we'll see that car onto pit road as well. And I think I can see the Roll Centre crew getting ready as the 168 car re-emerges from the garage.
Just looking up Martin Lampkin's achievements. The first ever FIM Trials World Champion in 1975. Motocross as well, inextricably linked with Bull Tarko. Three-time winner of the British National Championship for Trials Bike. The Scottish 6-day trial, three-time consecutive winner, 76 through to 78. And his son carrying on the family business, Dougie Lampkin. Dennis de Burst this time, 2:33 last time, but Martin Short is in the pit lane. Joe Bradley.
And Martin Short brings that number 246 BMW to virtually my feet, and it's Richard Neary who's going in the car. So still on this 2 hours on, 2 hours off between these two drivers. They've been pretty much on this all night long to keep the competitive edge of this car going and continuing. A bit better shape than he was a few hours ago when he got out of the car. He can at least walk this time.
Joe,
yes, go on.
Did they put new tyres on that car? Did they leave the ones on that were already on there?
They are already rolling. They've just changed driver.
Yeah,
no
that's what I thought there. So that's the scrubbed slicks that Martin had on, trying to keep some heat in those tyres, I would think. Now, does it go directly for fuel? I suppose it will, and get the maximum, which is 110 litres for this BMW. This, remember, the chassis. No, straight out for the 246, so driver change only.
This is all about pressure. This is all about
Absolutely
exerting
agree.
pressure. Paul Truswell telling me that Darren Cox got out of that car at 7:15 yesterday evening. So this pair has been exerting this pressure all through the night and into the morning, as we've got...
It's practically 14 hours that
between the two of them.
Both Martin Short and Richard Neary have been at the wheel, and just the two of them doing the driving.
There's some spirited discussions going on the pit wall, John.
Yeah, that's Stuart Pringle, who's the man at the head of Silverstone. Talking to Gary Willems, the man at the head of Creventic. And can't tell you what's being said, but there's a regulation book there and some interesting conversation. Joe Bradley is down in the pit lane, and Martin Short is within microphone reach. Let's have a quick word with the man from Roll Centre. A brave, gutsy move that has sparked a response from the competitors. Slick tyres for the 246.
2 hours on, 2 hours off, mate. It's like it's beginning to get grueling, surely.
I feel really good. the second stint, I got out of the car and I felt absolutely terrible. But then the third stint, it's like, I don't feel too bad. And now I feel bloody great. That was a fantastic stint, absolutely fantastic. Sort of rolled the dice a bit with the slicks, but it seems to have been the right choice.
What was it? Was it the right choice initially when you went out there, or did you think, oh, what have I done? Because it looked slippery.
It was. The first lap was slippery, but I was still only 10 seconds slower than my best time that I'd done on the wets, so it wasn't a disaster. The next lap was 3 seconds quicker. The next lap was 3 seconds quicker. But it took half a dozen laps, and I was being overtaken by a couple of cars. It took half a dozen laps, to get some pace, and now suddenly in the last 3 or 4 laps, boom, it's all working. I'm a bit gutted though, because I could see the sun rising up behind the mist, and I thought, yeah, here we go, and then it clouded over again.
Now tell me, if hopefully you're not going to give too much away here, but yeah, I can understand staying with the same tyres if you've just been brought in on, but no fuel.
No, because we want to get the boys in the car. It's still pretty slippy. So Richard's elected to do this stint, and just as a driver change, I had to come in anyway. And in 40 minutes' time, hopefully, it will be good for Charles to finally get a go in the car. But, we're in such a good position. We want to give the car in the best possible condition to the guys, so, so there'll be no errors,
And you haven't raced in many endurance series, Martin. the 24-hour series regulations with regards to maximum stint times, that's when it really gets complicated, because here we have Richard Neary now going out for only a 40-minute stint. Now, in other series, that would be unheard of, wouldn't it? Just putting a driver in for 40 minutes. But it's quite a tactical set of regulations. This takes a lot of thinking.
Well, it is because of the refuelling. You know, the refuelling is the big hit. The pit stop, you know, we'll lose a minute or something like that. But if it done the, you know, you've only got the length of the pit lane to worry about. You know, when you come in just for the fuel, you've got the 30 seconds or whatever it is, whatever it takes. So that's what you actually lose if you don't refuel at the same time. And you know, you can arrive at the fuel pumps and find that they're completely full. So it is tactical. You're absolutely right. I don't know if we've got the best policy, but I'm really chuffed that we've taken 2 laps out of the leader. So we've done something right.
Well, Paul Truswell's calculated that you guys have got slightly better fuel consumption than the 127 car, which you've been battling with all night. When will your target time come into play?
When we reach it, literally. You know, when if the conditions improve enough, and you know, the conditions like this, it's not really going to dry out properly. You know, it's too dry for wets. It's not perfect for slicks, but I'll be surprised if we get near the 218s, which is actually good for us, because I think that we run quicker in these conditions from what they've been telling me. They didn't talk to me on the radio. They didn't tell me what I was doing or, you know, what the gap was, but I've just come in and I've been told that we were 4, 5, 6 seconds quicker. I don't know. But these conditions are great for us, so long may it continue.
Absolutely. He's just done a 26.
Awesome.
Thanks, Martin.
Thanks.
Nicely done, Joe Bradley with Martin Short down in the pit lane. 26-1 for Richard Neary, who's straight down to business. A little bit of curb hopping and sliding from the two. I'm not sure. And on the front straight, we've got an accident.
That's the NKPP car.
This is the car that has just been stealthily running up. He's been into the wall or something else. This is the fourth position machine.
That's the wing.
Harry Hilders, and it's coming out of
the wing,
the club corner and onto the Grand Prix starting straight.
Actually, John, I think this is an ideal time to put Charles Lamb out, because it gives him time, albeit at just code 60, to actually look at the... Paul's shaking his head. You think not?
I don't think so, because I think what's going to happen while the code 60 is out is all that heat that Martin and Richard have put into the tyres will go out of the tyres, and that'll make it even more difficult for Charles.
Change the strategy. Richard goes down, fuels up, extends his window and stays out, and then that extends the time that you've got to make the decision about who you put in the car.
Richard's gone straight for fuel.
Yeah. That would have been that. I think that's perfect. I think that's really great thinking on the fly. A clear entrance to the pit fueling area for the 246.
No, there's a pistol grip in the back of that car.
There is a pistol grip in the back of that car to the right rear. And I think that is a very sharp bit of moving tactics. You know, you've got to be flexible, gentlemen. Good. You have to be. They're good. You don't. These guys, second in the Bathurst 24 hours shorty and roll centre. Don't forget, won this race.
Have they done endurance racing before?
I think they've done a bit.
It's not a name I'm familiar with.
Stop it.
Was it 4th overall at Le Mans? Remember?
Yeah,
and led Le Mans, of course.
Well, Shorty did lead Le Mans for a while, was never scored as the leader, much to his chagrin.
Process?
No, I've got to say, the recovery teams today have been outstanding. The stricken Seat, and terribly bad luck for the 125 NKPP team, and Harry Hilders particularly, who's been one of their star weapons out there. That's already rolling, so once that can get off the circuit and onto one of the interior roads, we will go back green. And that is brilliant use of code 60. Joe Bradley has been into the 303 pit, and that car was in the garage for a brief moment of time, which is effectively less than 2 laps under code 60.
Exactly. Which in itself which in itself there's a point to be raised there, because it does give everybody a chance to get into the pits whilst the Code 60 is in place. So you can't say, I was really unlucky. I was at Beckett's when the Code 60 got called, and by the time I got to the pit in, it was back to green again. It didn't happen because none of the Code 60s were that short.
Story of the race is the rise and rise of the 246 ABBA commercials with Roll Centre Racing BMW M3, built to GTR specifications, although not originally coming out of the factory as a GTR. This is the chassis, though, that won here in 2012 and acquired by Roll Centre for this type of racing, extensively refitted, basically taken down to a bare shell and rebuilt over at Roll Centre's superb facilities over at St Ives in... Now, are they still just in Cambridgeshire?
Yeah. And catching the leader again to unlap itself pretty rapidly at the moment. Not in the first sector there with a bit of traffic for Richard, but on the previous lap taking a further 5 seconds out. So to get back again, Paul, I think I'm right, under 2 laps.
You are right, yes. When
he gets by, if he gets by.
If he gets by, it'll be under 2 laps. At the moment, it's just over 2 laps.
So the net loss for that additional pit stop for Richard, tiny.
That's right, but then, to be fair, that's because the Bleekemolen car also had an extra pit stop when it had to go onto the slick tyres during the green period. So it kind of what goes around comes around. Really just need this the effect of the Code 60 to work its way out. But we're not in the closing stages yet.
No,
we're still in the third quarter.
What we've got then is order sort of restored. The Roll Centre car, the quicker at the moment on the circuit, having lost a little bit of ground over all that tactical coming and going, but still on the attack.
Just a quick thought as well about that extra fuel. It's not just that Richard Neary can go further, it gives them more options again. We've got to stress that. It allows them to make a decision based on tactics rather than we must stop for fuel at a certain time. And their scramble to get that car in, fill it and send Richard out. Effectively, Richard's got, if he wants it, another 90 minutes in that car, and he's probably got the fuel for, if not all of that, pretty close to it.
Pretty close to it. He's now right on the tail of the leader to unlap himself from one of those 2 full laps he's down. He's going to look up the inside here. He's under, by the way, he's under attack from behind by Rick Breukers. Yeah. Because with those new, he takes that takes that lap back pretty easily there.
Yeah, that's in the Brooklands.
Rick Breukers, 2:23 last time around, took 5 seconds out of the Roll Centre car, 3.5 minutes back in the third position in the 303, so that's one to be watched as well. 127 takes a bit of a look around the outside, no way by there, and Richard Neary will pull away on current pace. I just had a quick look at the back, Joe, and Darren Cox is there. I think actually praying to the Lord himself up there on this Sunday morning that he gets better weather conditions to go out in what's still fairly marginal.
Yeah, he wants to actually get out though, doesn't he? It's like, I think if the conditions remained, I think we'd see Richard Neary and Martin Short kill themselves by 4 o'clock this afternoon. We'd literally be carrying Martin Short out. Mind you, he did spring out. He's getting used to it because
he still got pulled out of the car.
Yeah, but as before, when he said, I think he alluded to it, he said he felt terrible when he got out the car a few hours ago because he could barely walk, as we saw. It's all over Twitter now. But that time, yes, he got lifted out of the car, but I think that's more of the kind of tight confines of the orifice he has to insert himself into. But once he was out of the car, he could actually walk this time.
No, he was good. Thanks, Joe.
Meanwhile, at the front of the pack, the second and third place cars into the 222s last time around. So conditions continue to improve and they continue to be able to exploit that, John.
To come out, and this is not good news, of course, for the 246. A best lap of 2:18.2. They have a reference time of 2:18. How close will we get to that? Well, we're at 21s at the moment, so still 3 seconds to come. That's a lot of time, even around this longish circuit.
Yes, but it's the ideal conditions for putting either of the two other drivers, be it either Darren Cox or Charles Lamb or even Richard Roberts, into the car. And if you're going to do it, then you want the conditions to be as good as they possibly could be. So, if Darren and Charles are going to have their go, which they, want to, have to. I mean, they don't have to, but I'm sure they want to. And the race is long enough that if the two of them each do a 2-hour stint, or if they do 2 1-hour stints, see how they get on, that gives Richard and Martin 4 hours to rest. And then if they need to go for it in the last remaining 3 hours of the race, they'll be able to.
Yeah. Down to a 2:20 now for Richard Neary. And the gap coming down to close to 4.5 minutes.
And still around about 45 minutes of driving time available to Neary. 2 or 3 minutes less for Pim van Riet at the head of the field. Just a little half spin from the 144.
2:20 again for Richard Neary. Against 2:22s for the leader, Pim van Riet, and third-placed Rick Breukers at the moment. So pace at the front of the race, led by this car. As he bursts into the booth behind us.
Into the booth
with his notes.
Let me tell you all about it. I'm just slapping him down now. What a shame that we didn't have a commentator cam there. That was perfect timing, Bradley.
Get the sack. 2:23 for the 127 car in the hands of Pim van Riet. Richard Neary, 2:22. Continues to just nibble into that gap, not making very large strides into it anymore.
And it is now, on occasion, just 1 lap the separation between them. It's 1 lap and a lot. The problems are going to be that the next pits caller, they're going to be around about the same time, but I think Richard Neary is going to have to call in the pits just before Pim van Riet does, despite the strategical wisdom of doing what they were doing. What I don't know is quite how much fuel Van Riet has aboard, because he stopped during the code 60 last time, so he won't have been able to get a full amount of fuel. The time before, when that car stopped, it was under green conditions, so it should have been able to make itself full then. So the period of green flag running before it came in was a little over an hour, so that's probably about right for a top up of 50% of its fuel. So fuel strategy critical, and I say the Roll Centre team getting themselves back onto the same strategy by that extra pit stop.
I've just had an awful thought about this effort. Now, I mean, what I'm not sure yet, depending on where this goes, is whether or not they will choose to put Charles Lamb in the car. If they think they can have a chance to attack. But worse than that, I just ask you to consider this for a moment, John Hindhaugh. How...
I know what you're going to say.
You know what I'm going to say, don't you?
That Coxey's been in the car, and even if he doesn't drive again, we're never going to hear the last of it.
Never going to hear the end of it. You got to exactly the same point as we're never going to hear it. If they can't win this race.
Just don't answer the phone.
Ever again.
Oh, dear.
Oh, no.
No, I thought about that about 3 hours ago.
I'm just
when
going
we
to take his number out of my phone. Hang on a minute. There we go.
When we were talking about how that might go, and just what he's going to be like. Oh. Never mind.
It was a nice friendship while it lasted, wasn't it?
I need to persuade Martin to let me have a go in the car so that I can just pace myself against Coxey's times.
Shall we just have a little reality check here?
6 hours and 5 minutes to go.
That is one part of the reality check. If I were to throw away 2 hours of that, and I'll tell you why in a minute, and say there's only 4 hours and 5 minutes to go, and then say that
this is like election night here, and Paul is playing the role of Peter Snow. If this happens, which it might not, but if it does, the swing-orbiter is over.
Absolutely. If the 246 is still going to be able to catch up that missing 4.5 minutes, it's going to have to do so at a rate of about 2 seconds a lap. Now, at the moment, I just mistimed that sentence, didn't I? I was going to say, at the moment, Richard Neary isn't able to catch up 2 seconds a lap over the 127, particularly with Pim van Riet at the wheel. But on that last single lap, he did. But we have to look at
the wider
trends.
picture. The wider picture. Yes.
We have to look at trends. So it all depends on how much of the race you're going to not account for, on the assumption that the other two drivers, when they get into the 246 car, I'm sure they're still going to play a role, but if they can go as quickly as the 127, all well and good. If they go more slowly than the 127 car, what they're then doing is giving a bigger task to Neary and Short to do in the remaining 4 hours of the race.
And come on, tell the ladies and gentlemen what just happened as you actually made that very, very well voiced point.
He took 2 seconds out of the car.
He took 4 seconds out of the car ahead, and both the second and third place cars into the 218s. It's Richard Neary's turn to be in a little bit of traffic, I believe, at the moment. A slower middle sector than he managed last time around.
Now, Richard Neary is getting very, very close to his personal best, which, remember, is the fastest lap of the race, 118.221. What Richard can't do is to do 117 point anything. 118.0 is his minimum reference lap time. So as long as he does 118 point something, it's fine. 118.221 is just 1/5 of a second slower. So around the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, 5.9 kilometres very nearly, is pretty fine timing from Richard, and he's still got fuel for about 35 minutes or so. Last 10 laps of Richard Neary, average lap speed for them was 2 minutes 20.8, 1.4 seconds per lap quicker than Pim van Riet. So it's quick enough if they keep up at that pace to catch the laps back before the end of the race, but I don't know that they'll always be able to keep up that pace depending who's at the wheel of the car. I think what we do is monitor the lap times, and if he's going down, because Rick Breukers on his stint before this one was actually marginally quicker on more occasions than not than Richard Neary was in the BMW. So the car has it in it. We know Bert de Hoijs has it in him because he's been very quick in the race already. So if the lap times aren't comparable, then it's something that has changed with the car, and we'll open up the conspiracy theory box again, Graham. But if the lap times are good, we'll go along with John's precautionary checks.
Meantime, Richard Neary is on a tear again. 2:18.5 last time around, 2:19.2 this time around. The gap is coming down again, under 4 minutes and 15 seconds now. Taken a wee bit of time out of the leader in the last 2 or 3 laps.
Richard, I think, though, is getting towards the end of his fuel, because at this kind of pace the fuel won't be lasting as long, and I'd be expecting him in sometime within the next 15-20 minutes max.
And, so we'll wait, we think, Charles Lamb, don't we, aboard the car, if they're going to change to one of the other two guys.
I think it's going to need some more investigative reporting to find out. Might be Joe Bradley for all we know.
Yeah, we'll just see whether or not it's Charles Lamb or whether or not Darren Cox has been persuaded out of a particularly fetching cardigan he was wearing earlier in the race.
But it was warm.
Warmer.
Yeah, well, somebody said it might be sunny out there, but I'm not taking any of my layers off yet. That was Papa Juliet, at Papa Juliet, PJ, here at Silverstone. And sure which car you were asking. The 168 Ewan O'Leary was asking about, didn't it make an appearance in one of the races last year? In fact, this is only the second race for the car.
Absolutely.
They had a 2-hour 750 Motor Club race at Donington a couple of weeks ago.
That is 30th position, the 168. Carl Swift aboard that car on an outlap now, 6th in A2. And it's the sandwich. 4 minutes and 10 seconds last time around ahead of the 246 car, the number 127. And with that little bit of traffic, it goes up to 2:21 for Pim van Riet against 2:19.2 for Richard Neary, but is getting closer and closer to the end of his fuel window.
Looked like something fairly fundamental, Joe. I was suggesting drive line.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're certainly in the right area. They're looking towards drive shafts here. We've got the wheels off at the front, and we might even be a drive shaft CV joint They tend to be the Achilles heel of front-wheel drive hot hatches.
And you speak of what you know, having run Clios, of course.
Yeah, very much. And Minis as well. Minis were worse than Clios for that sort of thing, especially if you use the curbs. But I'm not really sure that these guys will have been using clattering curbs that you would do in a sprint race. There's just no point. They're still trying to get the bottom of it, so there's nothing apparent visually with regards to the drive shaft.
Joe, we're going to rejoin our live TV audience at the moment on Motor, in a moment on Motor, so I'm going to ask you to stay there and probably recap what you've been talking about once we get back to the European TV audience. Our international TV stream continues, of course, on 24hrs.com and the pop-out player at radiolemans.com on the endurance page.
The news for that crew will only get worse, I'm afraid, John, because the next two cars in the train are close together and are for position. So if they can't get that car out within a lap, it's going to fall off the podium position for A3.
But there is a genuinely light grey dry line on a lot of the circuit, and the whole of the Hangar Sid is absolutely dry, should I say. The sunshine shining on the righteous here at the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit for the first running of the Hankook 24 Hours of Silverstone. The Touring Car Endurance Series kicking off in style here with this big race, and the stories and headlines keep coming. The latest bit of drama playing out for the second place car in Class A3, Joe Bradley, in the depths of the very dark, very cold and very horrible night. Just in the bottom of the picture there, the Team Roll Centre BMW, the ABBA Commercials car, Richard Neri at the wheel, who has shared the driving in 2-hour on, 2-hour off stints with Martin Short through the night. The tricky strategy that put this car on slick tyres before anyone else has paid off. Everyone had to then react to the decision. Martin Short, after a couple of laps to get the Hankook slicks up to temperature, was taking chunks of time out of everyone and basically forced the cars around him onto their strategy. Then Richard Neri jumped in, originally just to do a 40-minute stint whilst the other two drivers were getting ready for the conditions to improve, but a Code 60 scrambled everything again, and Roll Centre deciding to change their tactics, fueled Neri and threw him back out, and he's been now in the car for something approaching 90 minutes, 1 hour and 28 minutes, second position for that carpool.
30 laps Richard Neri has been out at the wheel of that, and I don't reckon he's got more fuel than will take him about 32 laps, so it will be coming in pretty soon, despite the fact that he's closing in on the race leader, the 127 Bleekemolen Seat, but that car also will be due for a pit stop for fuel.
And the pace we're seeing at the moment out of the second place car does indicate, Paul, that we're getting close to the end of that fuel window, back into the 218s again.
That's the nip back to Joe Bradley, as he's got an update for us on that car that was second place in A2. Joe, what do you got?
Well, process of elimination and diagnostic methods has uncovered that it's probably the diff that is gone. It's just made an appalling noise there. So that isn't good. And I think at this stage, well, we're certainly going to see those laps out of way, that the laps advantage that we've got. I doubt even that the guys have got a spare diff. I mean, it's not something that you really expect to go. These things are usually bulletproof.
Thanks, Joe. That's really bad news.
It's already dropped out of the podium position, and if they do get that car out, it's a long job, if indeed, as Joe says, they have the wherewithal to undertake it.
So let's take you through, as we've got a slow Seat on the Hangar Straight heading towards Stowe, and that was a white car.
Was that the one?
I think that was the leader.
It's the leader.
It is the leader.
It's the leader.
Pim van Reet has got a problem. There was just a part of me there, and there's smoke coming from the exhaust pipes, and there's fluid. There's fluid, and the Bleekemolen car is in real trouble. Massive drama for Team Bleekemolen, and the leader for well, more than half of the time that we've been racing now is into the Grand Prix pit lane. That is very considerate driving from Pim van Reet. He may be able to get that car back on the surface roads, but that looks to me like an engine problem. These TCR cars are not built primarily for endurance racing, but have proved to be a very good endurance racing tool. Let's just have another look. Oh dear.
Oh, no.
Great catch by the replay text. Thanks, guys. That was from the engine and from the exhaust pipe, and white smoke would suggest to me turbo or something related. And Richard Neri, next time around then, will put himself onto the lead lap. It's the Synchro Honda behind him with Dan Wheeler at the wheel, turning some very quick laps indeed. And at the moment, keeping pace, well, at least through the twisty bits, keeping pace with the BMW ahead. That tells you, doesn't it, just how much that car's been turned down in terms of power as Neri's coming to the end of his stint. He will have to be careful here. There is oil on the line there. But a good job by Pim van Reet to make as little influence on the track surface as possible.
Stayed way over, didn't he?
Yeah.
Crossed across to get to a place of safety. So they will be looking for a way to get that car back as quickly as possible.
That lap, that fastest lap, is the fastest lap of the race, the 2:18.2, and that was done by Richard Neri, who's at the wheel of that car. Oh, so unlucky again for the Blake Molan team. They have run so far, Paul, an absolutely faultless race. They took the opportunities when it came to them. Oh, the engine has died, and it's been pushed rather ignominiously down the Grand Prix pit lane. Been at the head of the race for how long?
15 hours that car has been leading the race, and that very nearly 200 laps. It took the lead on lap 94, and we're on lap 388 at the moment. So, let's say more than half the race has been led by that car without any interruption at all.
So this car, number 246, the ABBA Commercials with Roll Centre Racing BMW. Well, this is a car that's won this race before, 2012. This car won the Brett Car 24 Hours here at Silverstone. And then 2005, the first year of the Silverstone 24 Hours, Roll Centre Racing won the race with one of the drivers that revisits this race this year, Martin Shorts, as part of that Mosler crew. What an astonishing story.
Well, yes, it's just this question of 5.5 hours to go in the race before we start counting any tissues. But Richard Neri will be close, I think, to the using all the fuel capacity that car has. He's currently on the 33rd lap of this stint for that car. His first stint in the same car he was driving, it was 36 laps, so he's not going any further than 36, and he may choose to come in a little bit before that. But
now, does this change the mentality of the ABBA Commercials with Roll Centre team? Because they've been pushing and chasing in the past and trying to force people around them to do things. They are about to get the lead with that car, the Bleekemolen car, not moving anymore. Do you switch now to say, OK, now we've got track position, now we've got the lead? Or do you just say, let's keep doing what we're doing?
You switch, but with great care. You don't just everybody rush around and start high-fiving, because that's the point when you come into the pits and you suddenly forget to do something and something terrible happens. You have to stay right on the ball. The team manager, if he's... I won't say if he's any good, he is a great team manager, will be going around saying, don't take any notice, we keep doing what we're doing. But in his head, yes, his mentality does change.
Good on to Joe Bradley in the pit lane. He's made his way down to the Bleekemolen pit. Joe?
Cruel and character building are two things that I can say right now. The 127 Seat has led this race for 15 hours. Dennis de Bost, I don't know what to say. The car at the moment has been peeled off into the Formula One pit lane down at Club Corner. It must be dejecting for you.
Yeah, I believe it's an engine failure. The motor is gone.
There's nothing you guys could have done to avoid that. It's just one of those things.
No, it's a total new car. We haven't expected that.
Yeah. I suppose now it's just gathering yourselves up and thinking about the next race. That's what we do in motorsport, isn't it?
Yes, we're going to look for the next round in Zandvoort.
So has the team manager had any kind of communication as to whether the car may be brought back? It might be something small.
Yes, the car is at the new Formula 1 paddock. Yeah. It's going to tow to the pit box.
All right. Fingers crossed, Dennis. There might be hope yet. Might get some kind of finish. Thanks, Dennis.
Oh, just utter dejection in the voice.
What can you do? What can you say?
Well, there's nothing. The bright red number 1 on the side of the 246 guys. Is that the first time that's led?
First time that car has been in the lead of the race, John. Yes. So the first, and don't forget, having started from the very back row of the grid, having missed the whole of the qualifying session on whenever it was, Friday afternoon, the qualifying session.
Drive shaft failures.
Don't even say things like that. Do you want Shorty round here to hit you on the back of the head with something?
Wouldn't be the first time.
Very heavy. Sammy Moutron has taken the number 1 car in to the pits and for fuel. So Richard Neri on lap number 388 is scored as the leader for Team ABBA Commercials with Roll Centre Racing, the BMW M3 V8, which won the race in 2012. Can it do the double and repeat in 2016?
Was there ever
and tail?
Was there ever a 24-hour race that didn't throw drama at us?
No, and you know what did we say earlier on? Was it late last night or early this morning? Does it actually matter how you categorise it? Laps between the leaders here, but don't think everything's cut and dried, ladies and gentlemen. Those words actually came out of my mouth. What I didn't expect was the kind of drama we've seen since the sun's come up.
Astonishing.
And still 5 hours and 19 minutes to go.
It's come from all sorts of different directions. The dramas we've just seen for the 127 car losing the lead and potentially into retirement. Engine failure, we're told, for the 127 car after leading the race for 15 hours. The issues earlier in the morning for the 208 Peugeot with the noise, failing noise testing and falling back in the order. Now back again into 5th position and will, by the look of things, get back its 4th position as a result of that issue for the 127 in some little while. But yeah, time and time again, it just pulls open the drawer of improbability and pulls out a surprise.
The infinite improbability drive has been engaged. Kudos to the recovery teams because they've had to find a way into the Formula 1 pit lane to do that. They've done that very nicely indeed. And that car will come back on the surface roads. And by the way, amidst the disappointment that Pin van Riet must have had behind the wheel, for him to have the presence of mind to take that option and get off the racing line rather than come around and spread oil or potentially put out another code 60.
Sportsman.
No, that is the respect for your other drivers that we're talking about. This is not just about side by side, not just about racing people for position, not just about when you're passing slower cars. It's that sort of thinking that I think characterises the Creventic style of racing, and it's a state of mind. It really is. So we have a new leader, and for the first time in this event, the Team ABBA with Roll Centre Racing M3 V8 leads, becoming the how many leaders? What does this add to the leaders, Paul?
We've had 5 different cars in the lead of the race, John.
By the 246 are by Richard Neri, former Ford Cosworth driver. It's the demise of the 127 that has put that car ahead. It's rather robbed us of the battle that was just beginning to heat up anyway between the 246 and the 147, the BMW of ABBA Commercials team, with the flat black and very fluorescent green livery, which looks great on that car. And they've got a Z4 BMW as well, which is in the same livery, which looks just as good. But the guys will take it. Richard Neri, we're expecting into the pits at the end of his fuel load shortly. He's now done I think something like 37 or 38 laps, has he, Paul?
He's currently on his 37th lap, that's right. And your question that you asked a moment ago about whether that changes the mentality of the team would seem to have been answered in the lap times for that car. On the lap that he took the lead, he did a 3 minutes 20. The lap after that, he did a 3:24. And on the lap that he's just completed, a 3:26.
2:26s, I'm presuming, not
sorry,
threes.
yes, 2 minutes and 26. All of those laps preceded by 2. So he's gone into fuel-saving mode, so we might actually see him out for a little bit longer, just to keep the fuel consumption as good as it possibly can be, and then we'll see him in for his pit stop.
That's wet weather times that we saw during the night, and they were saving a huge amount of fuel during the wet weather running.
In effect, they were making the 2-hour driving limit match the 100-litre fuel tank, sorry, the 110-litre fuel tank limit that BMW runs with.
Scored down to Joe Bradley, who has an update on the number 136. This was another issue just a few moments ago for one of the front-running cars, this time